Governor Gary Johnson.
I would not be standing here before you tonight if I didn't think I could do a really good job as President of the United States. And I base that on my resume. I have been an entrepreneur my entire life. Since I've been 17 years old, I've paid for everything that I've had in my life. When I was a junior in college, 1974, I actually started a one-man handyman business in Albuquerque and grew that business to employ over 1,000 people. Electrical, mechanical, plumbing, pipe fitting, architects, engineers. It's amazing what can happen if you show up on time and do what you say you'll do for people. And that was really the basis for the success. I've got a bit of advice for all of you, and it's worth exactly what you're paying for it, which is nothing. But that is, whatever your expertise, whatever it is you like doing, apply it entrepreneurially. Apply it entrepreneurially. Go into business for yourself. Become your own boss. And the rewards you will find will be 100-fold that of doing or working for somebody else. I'm also an athlete. I've been an athlete my entire life, and what athletics has taught me is that life is a journey, it's not a destination. If you make life a destination, you're just bound to be disappointed, so enjoy what it is you do. It was mentioned that I climbed Mount Everest. I actually got to summit Mount Everest, and I want you all to know I did not conquer Mount Everest. Nobody conquers Mount Everest. I got really lucky. She lifted her skirt, she gave us a peek, and life was good. But back to life as a journey. You know, I get to go over to Nepal. I was fit enough to do that, and it just turned out. It was really fortunate. 2 months prior to my going to Nepal to climb Mount Everest, I broke my leg. A full fracture of the tibia. That's another thing that we all come in contact with, which is nothing we do goes according to plan. Nothing. Count on that as being part of the plan. When I broke my leg, when I had a full fracture of the tibia, you know, that would have been an easy time to lay back on the couch and think, oh, well, this just wasn't meant to be. Or the notion that, well, this happened, I can still make this happen, and I'm going to move forward, and that's our lives. Things get in the way of everything that we do, and depending on how we deal with adversity is really whether or not we're successful or not. So another one of those pieces of advice that is worth exactly what you're paying for it is imagine your life, and you're watching your life on a movie screen every single day. You're the star, you're the director, you're the producer. Do you like what you see? And if you don't like what you see, there's one person in control of this production, and that's you. And you can change it immediately. So the old adage about make the most out of your life, make the most out of your life, and you're the one that can make the most out of your life. When I ran for governor of New Mexico, I had never been involved in politics before, and I mean never. I went and I introduced myself to the Republican Party 2 weeks before I announced, completely outside of politics. New Mexico's a state that's 2-to-1 Democrat. I went and I introduced myself to John Latuzio, who was the chairman of the Republican Party in New Mexico, and here's what he says. He says, wow, man, I like what you got to say. I like you. I I like what you've done with your life. Republican Party, we're going to be totally inclusive. You can come, you can take part in the traveling show, make your pitch to all Republicans in the state, take part in all the debates and take part in all the discussions. I mean, make your pitch for why you should be governor. He said, I think it's a good pitch, but you just need to know that you'll never get elected governor, that it's not possible to come from completely outside of politics, and even if you win the nomination, there's no way you're going to win the general election because the state is 2-to-1 Democrat. Well, I got elected, and I would like to think it was based on what I had to say, which was just bring a common sense business approach to state government. Best product, best service, lowest price, keep government out of the bedroom, allow me to make decisions that really only I should be making. And I got elected, and I think most significantly, I got re-elected. I got re-elected in a state that was 2-to-1 Democrat, and becoming governor of New Mexico, I think I distinguished myself in many categories, but one of the categories was I may have vetoed more legislation than the other 49 governors in the country combined. I vetoed 750 bills. I had thousands of line item vetoes. Only 2 were overturned, so it made a difference when it came to billions of dollars worth of spending. It made a difference when it came to government telling you or I what we should or shouldn't do in the bedroom. It made a difference when it came to you or I making decisions that I think only you or I should have been able to make. Now, in a state that's 2-to-1 Democrat, I should have been ridden out on a rail, but I did get re-elected by a bigger margin the second time. I just think it speaks volumes to the fact that people really appreciate good stewardship of tax dollars. Now, this legislation that I vetoed all sorts of legislation, and I could cite hundreds and hundreds of different examples, but I remember one piece of legislation which was quadruple fines for speeding in a construction zone. You know what, as a libertarian, and I think you know you're a libertarian when you know that you hate speed limits. I'm using the construction speed limit as an example. You know, they set a speed limit in a construction zone, let's say 50 miles an hour. And we drive through there at 50 miles an hour, and at a certain time in the day, 50 miles an hour is reckless driving. Other times, though, we drive through that same area, nobody's there, it's the middle of the night, and you can be going 100 miles an hour perfectly safe. Well, that's the way government should be, in my opinion, is it should rely on you and I as individuals to make these choices for ourselves. There are other third-party candidates in this election, but I am on the ballot in 48 states. I'm an official write-in candidate in the state of Michigan, and shame on Oklahoma for the rest of their days for being the only state that doesn't have a third party on the ballot. Putting this into perspective, the Green Party, I believe, is on the ballot in 30 states. So putting this into perspective, and there are other third-party candidates, but they're even less than the 30 states. So when I talk about myself and my opponents, I am talking about Barack Obama and Mitt Romney in the context of being on the ballot in all of these states. So when it comes to the issues, I'm the only candidate that doesn't want to bomb Iran. We bomb Iran, we're going to find ourselves with another 100 million enemies to this country that we wouldn't otherwise have. The largest demonstration in the world after 9/11 in support of the United States was in Tehran, Iran, where over 1 million citizens showed up in support of the United States. If we bomb Iran, we're going to find ourselves in a 2-year bombing maintenance program with Iran. And right now we have these economic sanctions against Iran. Well, inflation in Iran right now is running at 75%. It's a horrible situation. Do citizens in Iran hate their government because of the 75% inflation? No. They hate the US because we're the ones that are instigating this. So how about the notion of free trade with other countries? Were we going to bomb Russia when they got a nuke? Were we going to bomb China when they got a nuke? Didn't we engage in trade with these countries? And isn't that pretty removed, really? I'm the only candidate running for president of the United States that wants to get out of Afghanistan tomorrow and bring the troops back. Evil is, the root of all evil is politicians beating their chests and in the name of, I'm going to save you against the terrorist threat, I'm going to save you against the illegal immigrant, I'm going to save you against the drug scourge, I'm going to save you against poor health, elect me or re-elect me. And when it comes to our military engagements, our military involvements, here it is, we've made hundreds of millions of enemies to this country that, but for these military interventions, would otherwise not exist. And in the name of, I'm going to save you from the terrorist threat, politicians are giving a death sentence to tens of thousands of innocent civilians in these countries where we intervene. And our men and servicewomen are coming back in body bags, or coming back with their limbs blown off. And the cause of all of this are politicians that just simply want to get elected or re-elected. So how about sending a message to any politician that wants to militarily intervene anywhere? And that's, I'm never going to vote for any politician that wants to militarily intervene. I'm the only candidate running for president that believes that marriage equality is a constitutionally guaranteed right on par with civil rights of the 60s. I am the only candidate running for president of the United States that wants to end the drug wars now. Legalize marijuana now. Not that you don't all understand this, Colorado has the opportunity to change worldwide drug policy by voting yes for Prop 64. I go around the country telling people, Coloradans get it. 6 years ago, citizens of Denver vote to decriminalize marijuana on a campaign based on marijuana being safer than alcohol. And growing up in New Mexico as your neighbor, I was always struck by the fact that Colorado has more per capita marijuana smokers than any other state in the country. Colorado, yes. And I heard this, I gave a radio interview before I got on here. How's this going to work when it comes to the other states? Colorado being the first domino that falls, Colorado that's going to be the first domino that 49 other states follow and bring about rational drug policy. Well, when everybody in the country wants to get on an airplane come the weekend to go to Denver to chill out, that's how it's going to work. How many of you have heard this argument, this ridiculous argument about people who are going to move to Colorado just so they can smoke pot? Well, yeah, and how about the millions of entrepreneurs, business people, doctors, scientists, lawyers, inventors that will move to Colorado for the same reason? work to have a president that's not adverse to vetoing legislation, I would have vetoed the Patriot Act. Homeland Security, incredibly redundant. TSA. Leave airport security to the airlines, to the airports, to the states, to the municipalities. And if I'm elected President of the United States and they don't abolish TSA, I guarantee you in a very short amount of time, TSA will be less intrusive and as safe. Because as President of the United States, as Governor of New Mexico, you control all the rules and regulations. I'm the only candidate running for President of the United States that would have vetoed the National Defense Authorization Act. Allowing for you and I, as U.S. citizens, to be arrested and detained without being charged. This is why we fought wars. This is why we fought wars.
That's true.
I am the only candidate that doesn't believe, I hate to say this, Santa Claus, Easter Bunny, and the Tooth Fairy. And in that regard, we have to balance the federal budget now. If we don't balance the federal budget now, we are going to find ourselves in a monetary collapse. And a monetary collapse, very simply, is when the dollars we have in our pocket don't buy a thing because of the accompanying inflation that goes along with borrowing and printing money to the tune of 43 cents out of every dollar we're spending. So when you talk about balancing the federal budget, you've got to start off by talking about Medicaid and Medicare and military spending. Medicare is a benefit that all of us in our lifetimes pay in $30,000 and we get a $100,000 benefit. By extension, whatever we pay into Medicare, we're getting a benefit 3 times that of what we're paying in. It is absolutely unsustainable, and if anybody believes it's sustainable, then I'm back to Santa Claus, the Easter Bunny, and the Tooth Fairy. We've got to fix this. It's going to be mutual sacrifice on the part of all of us, but we've got to do this. And here we've got Obama and Romney arguing over who's going to spend more money when we have to be looking at slashing spending and a monetary collapse. Soviet Union experienced a monetary collapse at the end of the 80s. And what happened prior to that? Gee, they were in Afghanistan for 10 years fighting a war that was not to be won, and it bankrupted them, and they suffered as a result of it. And not in our lifetimes are they going to recover from a monetary collapse. I am the only candidate running for President of the United States that is advocating eliminating income tax, eliminate corporate tax, abolish the IRS, and replace all of it with one federal consumption tax. Now, the federal and I am embracing the fair tax. It ends up being cost neutral over a very short amount of time. It's really the answer when it comes to American exports, bleeding out all existing federal non-transparent tax out of goods and services that we would export. It's the answer when it comes to China, and it's the answer when it comes to American jobs. If tens of millions of American jobs are not created with a zero corporate tax rate environment, I don't know what it takes to create tens of millions of jobs. And under the fair tax, no longer would there be withholdings from your payroll check. No more Social Security taken out, no more unemployment, no more Medicare. All of those proceeds would come out of the proceeds of the fair tax. Really reboot the American economy for the next 100 years.
Yes.
Crony capitalism is alive and well in this country. Both parties have their hands out to sell loopholes. Individuals, groups, and corporations buy those loopholes. Enact the fair tax. Half of Washington lobbyists get pink slips because half of Washington lobbyists are there to garner these loopholes. And then talking about crony capitalism, I'm the only candidate running for president that would sign legislation abolishing the Federal Reserve. What an inside game.
Yeah.
Treasury prints money, they give it to the Federal Reserve. Federal Reserve gives money to the banks at 0%. Do the banks give that money to you or I? No, they buy treasuries in a closed loop, making profits without taking any risk whatsoever, and we are paying for those profits.
Yep.
Yeah.
This is America today, and this doesn't have to be America today.
That's right.
And I'm the only candidate running for president of the United States that would sign legislation repealing legal tender laws and establish competing currencies, which would actually give value to the currency that we have. I ran 2 campaigns for governor of New Mexico where I did not mention my opponent in print, radio, or television. People are hungry to vote for a leader. People don't want to vote for the lesser of two evils. People want to actually vote for somebody that they think can make a difference. So that said, Barack Obama, I have to tell you, everything that Barack Obama says, I agree with. Everything. There's nothing that I disagree with what he has to say. I liken him to playing a violin. And the music that comes out is just that. It's music. It's just that nothing matches up with the words. The reality is about as far removed from the words as it possibly can be. Who would have believed that he would be as militaristic a president as we have ever had? Who would believe that we're funding the Syrian insurgents right now, a quarter of which are jihadists? Didn't we learn anything when it came to Afghanistan? And then all this Libya stuff. Why did we have anyone in these Libyan embassies in the first place? This is an area looking for targets, and we're giving them targets? This is not a show of weakness. This is a show of strength. This is a show of we understand what's going on. Barack Obama, he promised he would not crack down on medical marijuana facilities where legislatures or citizens voted to implement these programs, and he's cracking down on medical marijuana facilities in Colorado and California, and he promised he wouldn't do that. And he promised, when it came to gay rights, I just thought, wow, we're going to really get down the path. But when you start talking about marriage equality and leaving it to the states, 42 states have said marriage is between a man and a woman. When you say leave marriage to the states, effectively saying, I'm not going to do anything about this. Marriage equality is a constitutionally guaranteed right on par with civil rights of the 60s. And then Mitt Romney. In the second debate, Mitt Romney says it's a no-brainer to build a fence across the border. You're looking at somebody, you're listening to somebody who does not have one molecule of brain based on that statement. Building a fence across the border would be an incredible waste of time and money. We should make it as easy as possible for somebody that wants to come into this country and work to get a work visa, not a green card. card, not citizenship, but a work visa, I maintain that immigrants would stand in line if the line was moving to get a work visa. And the reason we have 11 million illegal immigrants here in this country is you can't get a work visa and come into this country and work. And yet everyone who wants to come into this country and work recognizes that if they can get across the border, even illegally, that there'll be a job there waiting for them. And that's the reason why we have 11 million illegal immigrants here in this country right now. And we don't want to be breaking up families. We don't want to be sending people back. Now I'm back to conduct a background check. We don't want criminals in this country, but we don't want to be breaking up families. And if we enact the fair tax, we're going to attract manufacturing jobs to the United States like never before. Foreign investment capital, which has decreased 50% over the last 8 years, would increase by 300% over the next 8 years. And then back to the border. So much of the border, so much of the attitudes of the border has to do with border violence. And border violence is a prohibition phenomenon. 90% of the drug problem is prohibition-related, not use-related. That's not to discount the problems with use and abuse, but that should be the focus. So we have 40,000 deaths south of the border over the last 4 years. These are disputes that are being played out with guns rather than the courts. Didn't we learn anything when it came to the prohibition of alcohol when disputes were being played out with machine guns as opposed to in the courts? And Mitt Romney says, we need to balance the budget, but we need to hold Medicare intact, and we need to increase spending for the military. I'm looking around here, and I'm believing that everybody here has finished the second grade, and the mathematic equivalency that went along with finishing the second grade, and it just doesn't add up. And he's supposed to be a smart guy. At the end of the debates the other night between Biden and Ryan says, we're going to increase spending by 3%. They're going to increase spending by 4.5%. What's the big deal? There isn't a big deal between either of them. It's status quo. It's putting our heads in the sand and believing that this is going to all fix itself somehow miraculously. It's not, and I think we all recognize that this has to be mutual sacrifice on the part of all of this if we're going to fix these very, very pressing issues that if we don't fix them, we're going to find ourselves without a country. So I get the notion, I get the thing all the time, wasted vote. You know, wasting your vote is voting for somebody that you don't believe in. That's wasting your vote. You vote for the person you believe in. That's how you change things in this country.
That's right.
And I want to make a pitch to all of you. And that pitch is waste your vote. Waste your vote. Vote for Gary Johnson. If everybody does that, I'm the next president of the United States. And my pledge to all of you is that no one will regret that vote. My pledge to all of you is there's no quit in me. There's no quit. What we want to do is we want to elect a leader who's going to get up every single day and doggedly pursue the things that they're talking about. That was the great hope with Obama, but none of it transpired. How about the notion of actually getting up every single day and going after these really difficult issues that nobody really wants to take on? As governor of New Mexico, good government was easy. It wasn't hard. And it started with looking at issues first and politics last. It made a huge difference. Three things over the last year, I think, that are significant, were significant. One was a poll. You know, they did a poll of all the presidential candidates and the favorabilities of those presidential candidates in his or her own state. Do you know there's only one presidential candidate viewed favorably in his or her own state? That's me. And how does that work out in New Mexico? In New Mexico, people wave at me with all 5 fingers, not just one. And then they did a study of all the presidential candidates and their job creation record. Who created the most jobs? Well, that ended up to be me, and my response to that was the same as it was when I was governor of New Mexico. I did not create one single job as governor of New Mexico. The private sector creates jobs, but I controlled all the agencies, I controlled all the boards and commissions, I controlled all the rules and regulations. I want to suggest to you that there was certainty in rules and regulations, with just a basis in common sense. Less time, less money to have to comply with government if it wasn't going to make us any more healthy, wasn't going to make us any safer. And then lastly, and something I'm very proud of, is the ACLU last December came out with a report card on all the presidential candidates. Now the ACLU, a group dedicated to civil liberties, a group dedicated to the first 10 amendments of the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, a group dedicated to the Constitution. They came out with a report card on all the presidential candidates. 24 Liberty Torches was a perfect score. This is important. Mitt Romney and Rick Santorum had 0 Liberty Torches out of 24. 0! And this is a guy vying to become President of the United States. Newt Gingrich had 4 Liberty Torches out of 24. President Obama had 16 Liberty Torches out of 24. Ron Paul, my hero, 18 Liberty Torches out of 24. But Gary Johnson had 21 Liberty Torches out of 24. It is important. It's important. The vast majority of Americans are fiscally responsible and socially accepting. And I don't use the term tolerant, I use the term accepting, because really, do any of us care the lives that anyone else lives as long as their life doesn't put you or I in harm's way? We really don't care. We're accepting. So the election is next Tuesday. I've made my request. I want to thank all of you for taking your time to be here this evening. I also understand that we can open this up for some questions, comments, any insults maybe that any of you have.
It was an honor to listen to you speak today, Mr. Governor. I have a question for you. To all the people, including my father, who question the fact that if you do get elected, how are you going to push legislation through? How are you going to push, all these laws and stuff through with, Democrats and Republicans going to basically lock you out? So what do you got to say to people like that who say if you are elected, how are you going to get bills through with Republicans and Democrats saying, nah, I don't want to support it?
I'll repeat questions if everybody can't hear, but could everybody hear? I thought that was pretty loud and everybody could hear. Well, so the question is, how do you get along with the legislature? I mean, how do you make anything happen in the legislature since you're a libertarian as opposed to being a Democrat or a Republican? Well, how about a libertarian president that'll challenge Democrats on what they're supposed to be good at, which is civil liberties? Let's get out of the war. Let's not bomb Iran. Let's bring about marriage equality. Let's end the drug wars. Repeal the Patriot Act. Never should have passed the National Defense Authorization Act. And then on the Republican side, I, Gary Johnson, President of the United States, Libertarian President of the United States, I veto this piece of crap Republican budget bill because it doesn't cut spending. How about getting a grip on both sides and make things happen? Make things happen from a civil liberties standpoint and make things happen from a dollars and cents standpoint.
There you go.
I agree with a lot of things you say, and I hope that Colorado will pass Amendment 64. That would be really awesome. I am disturbed by some things, and one is, I think you kind of captured it when you said you don't because you care about people that can make money. Not everybody can make money. I do a lot of work with people who are incarcerated. I do a lot of work with people who are mentally ill and disabled. A country that does not care for the most downtrodden is going to be a mess. And Obama has made changes there, whether you want to discount them or not. And on his website, he says he is going to get rid of student loans.
Yeah. Woo! Yeah.
Okay, so we can have all wealthy people. I teach college, I have for 3 decades. That's going to be a problem. If you say you embrace diversity, it's not going to help diversity.
Well, just for a second, let's take student loans for example. What is the reason for the high cost of tuition?
Guaranteed loans, guaranteed.
It's guaranteed government student loans.
That's
it's,
right.
It's colleges of higher education that are immune from the pricing. It's artificial. I guarantee you, if there were no guaranteed government student loans, that the cost of tuition would be significantly lower. And I also want to say that I actually do care about those people that are truly in need. I think that but for government, perhaps those that are truly in need would not receive the goods and services that they really need to survive. It's just I think we've stepped way over the line, and the implication of what we've done, if we don't control this, is we're not going to have health care for anybody. That's a monetary collapse. No government services for anybody. No, I absolutely care about it, and I absolutely fundamentally believe that these difficult choices when it comes to abortion belong with you, period. Period.
That's right.
Pardon me?
Am I going to do the abortions, or am I just going to pay for it?
Well, don't.
I think it's a decision that you should have to make.
Private welfare.
Who does their money?
Private charity, private welfare.
That's right.
Why do I want to get rid of President Obama's health care plan? I think it's like the torpedo in the sinking ship. I think that very fundamentally it's just not affordable. And that what we need when it comes to health care is genuine free market approaches to health care.
That's right.
And that healthcare in this country is about as far removed from free market as it possibly could be. Would I have insurance to cover myself for ongoing medical need? That would be like having oil change insurance for your car. You have insurance on your car to cover yourself from catastrophic injury or collision. So in a free market approach for healthcare, I would have insurance to cover myself for catastrophic injury and illness, and I would pay as you go in a system that, if it genuinely had free market, would have advertised pricing, would have the lid blown off when it comes to supply. We would have dozens of choices as opposed to none. I mean, we just look at the medical marijuana issue in and of itself as an alternative to prescription drugs, which I think are very dangerous, and I don't think medical marijuana has killed anyone. When the whole debate started on health care, the notion of doubling the number of doctors, that is something that the government could do. I know that you all have friends that have applied to medical school, and that for the most part, everybody that applies to med school is really well qualified, but I think about a quarter of the kids that want to get into med school end up in med school. How about the notion of doubling the number of doctors, something that would be very real? Advertised pricing, pay as you go. I would pay as you go in a system that was really competitive, that was genuinely free market. When this whole debate started about health care, I had envisioned gallbladders are us. Clinics that would specialize in gallbladder surgery at thousands of dollars as opposed to tens of thousands of dollars. But this is the kind of innovation that we could see if government worked really away stepped away from healthcare, and the fact that crony capitalism is so alive and well when it comes to healthcare. We have a restricted number of choices. The liabilities are so high, the barriers to entry make it impossible to offer up alternatives. Government could be involved in the opposite kind of legislation.
Good evening, Governor. My question is on the wars and why we keep calling them wars, because from my understanding, we have to have a declaration of war from Congress. Is that not correct?
That's true.
Yeah, it's absolutely correct.
Without this declaration, we're invading the
That's
Middle
true.
East under it's illegal under the Constitution, then, is it not?
It is.
So how would you, as president, make that even harder for a president to become a dictator like Bush and Obama and by invading all these countries without the American people voting on it in Congress, drafting a declaration of war?
Well, the notion that the President of the United States takes an oath to strictly adhere, to govern under strict adherence to the United States Constitution, something that I would take very seriously when it comes to intervention, getting attacked, that Congress would authorize the response to that attack. But attack, not military intervention. We are militarily intervening in all world affairs, and the results are that we're vilified by the entire world.
And I still, within my next question is, why are they not impeached? And where do I go to start that process?
Well, and you're probably very familiar with the intricacies of how they go about doing this, but I think this is the opportunity that exists next Tuesday, or early voting, to actually...
That's my vote, Mr. Governor. I already voted for you.
Thank you very much.
I know you believe in the free market. I'm just curious your stance on companies like Monsanto poisoning our environment and destroying our genetic codes.
Yeah, so talking about Monsanto, and I assume you're talking about GMOs. Look, I have celiac disease. I can't function unless food is labeled. I have to find out whether food has gluten or not, and if I can't find that out, then I become very sick. So as consumers, we should be able to see food labeled, and GMO should be part of that labeling.
I'm just wondering, you keep talking about how, like, when you get to 5%, and I know that's a good goal to have, but, like, what's special about the number of 5%?
Well, so what's special about 5% and the Libertarian Party? What's special is not having to have issues with ballot access, having automatic access to, in fact, be the third party. It's incredibly difficult to get on the ballot in 48 states and be a write-in in the other state. It's incredibly difficult. So all of that goes away. There also is an issue of federal funding that comes to bear, and that is the checkoff that we all seem to check off when it comes to giving a few bucks of our own taxes to presidential candidates. It's really a significant leveling of the playing field potentially for 2016.
I want to give you some alternative currency. Bill of Rights silver.
Wow. Thank you. So, what's gasoline? What's more expensive? 1971, when a gallon of gas was 25 cents, or gasoline today? And the 25 cents in 1971 would have been with a silver quarter. Actually, it's
It's the same, isn't it?
With
was
inflation.
it, when did we go? 64. Thank you.
Yeah.
So I'm just going back to 71 and gas prices in 71. If you'd have paid for that with a silver quarter, you know, gas. Anyway, my point is that commodity-based currency has a lot going for it, and to get to a commodity-based currency, to do that, we would have to repeal legal tender laws. We would have to pass legislation allowing for competing currencies which would allow our dollars to actually have a basis in a commodity, which to me, I would love to have that be the case.
We talked about consumption tax, I just wondered what your percentage proposal was for that, and if all that, how that would affect lower income families still, since still raises the price of things.
So what I'm advocating is one federal consumption tax. In this case, I'm embracing the fair tax because it is a proposal before Congress. Check it out, fairtax.org, check it out. It's a 23% consumption tax that ends up being cost neutral over a very short amount of time. So if I could use a can of Coke as an example, a can of Coke that sells for $1 today has arguably 23% embedded non-transparent federal tax. That would be corporate tax that Coke pays, that would be Social Security match that Coke pays, that would be unemployment, that would be Medicare. You're going to bleed all that out so that can of Coke wouldn't have to sell for $1 anymore for Coke to make the same profit. They would sell it for 80 cents. Now, if you're thinking Coke would continue to sell the can of Coke for $1, well, Coke is competitive. It's free market. It's not like healthcare. Cola is very competitive. And then your second point is that a consumption tax is regressive. It's one of the criticisms of a consumption tax. The way the fair tax deals with the regressive nature of a consumption tax is that it issues all of us a $200 a month rebate check. So we all get $200 a month, $2,400 a year, that allows all of us to pay the consumption tax up to the point of the poverty level. That's how it avoids the criticism of being regressive. And it only applies to new goods, services. It doesn't apply to used goods. It doesn't apply to business transactions. So if you're building a house, if the contractor is building a house, the contractor is not going to have to pay a 23% consumption tax on the 2x4s and the electrical and the mechanical and the plumbing. The contractor is going to be excluded from paying those taxes up to the end product. And if you use that example, that would be furniture, that would be automobiles, televisions, you name it. So end product is what ends up to be subject to the consumption tax, which, back to my argument, ends up to be cost neutral.
Thank you for coming. Big Ron Paul supporter. I've been a supporter for you just as long. I wanted to give my vote to you to send that message. And I wanted to see if you could go back to, he was speaking about Monsanto, if you could talk about the revolving door between big business, corporations, and government. Say how the head of Monsanto is apparently the head of the FDA.
So growing my business to 1,000 employees, becoming governor of New Mexico, making many hires, Mitt Romney made this statement. He said, "I really love to fire people." I have to tell you that there is nothing more difficult than firing people. Nothing. But growing up as I have grown up, it's really easy to hire people. You only hire the best people. You never make a mistake. And I'm kidding, because you do make mistakes. And it isn't necessarily a mistake that you made. It's just that it just doesn't work out. But if you don't cut short people that don't work out, in the private sector, you end up bankrupt. And in the public sector, it's even worse, because they show up every single day and they actually just bleed the system. And that's what we've got, is we've got a system that's being bled. And I know that that's kind of a stretch from the fact that we end up hiring people in the industries to regulate and oversee these industries that are supposed to be overseeing these industries, and they come directly from those industries. I will just tell you, from my experience as governor of New Mexico, there was not one single job that was predetermined. Everything was come apply. You know, we're gonna hold interviews. We're gonna try and hire the best and the brightest. Not one position was predetermined. It worked out pretty well. It worked out pretty well, and I wasn't the guy that hired these these ex-corporate guys to come in and actually oversee the corporations that they're supposed to run herd over. And fundamentally, government has a responsibility to protect us against individuals, groups, corporations that would do us harm. That's the fundamental role of government. Fundamental role of government is to protect us against countries that would attack us. That's the fundamental role. So we should provide ourselves with a strong national defense. But defense is the operative word, not offense and not nation building.
I lived along the Mexican border for a really long time on the Mexican side and saw the war on drugs in a really violent manner, and it was horrifying. But I'm curious, I mean, obviously every college kid and every cool person in America can jump on the legalized marijuana bandwagon, but when it comes to cocaine and poppy seed and all these things that, you know, my friends in Mexico are walking around with bodyguards 24/7 because his dad owns a construction company that won't build a runway in the middle of the desert for these frickin' drug lords, and it's all because of the economic incentive of an illegal substance that they trade with they illegally import into our country. You know, what are you going to do about cocaine and heroin and these drugs, and do you think it's realistic that it can be legalized in this country?
So first of all, if we legalized all drugs tomorrow, the world would be a much better place if we did that. But we're not going to go from A to Z. We're not going to go from where we're at to legalizing all drugs. Where we're going to go to is legalizing marijuana. And I think when everybody recognizes that the world is a better place, that police actually go out and enforce real crime as opposed to non-violent, victimless crime, that the courts actually get freed up, that we have fewer people than the 2.3 million people that we have behind bars today. I think we take giant steps, and Colorado has the opportunity to take the first giant step. But once we legalize pot, I think we take the first giant step, which is to look at drugs first as a health issue rather than a criminal justice issue. Now, when I was governor of New Mexico, I met with judges in Portland, Oregon, who showed up to meet with me, and I didn't know how that meeting was going to go, but there were about 6 judges, and when they came, and I showed up to the meeting, and what they said was, hey, what you're saying is right on. We agree with what you're saying, but we would like to share with you a story here that maybe you can pass on to others to have others better understand the drug issue. They said that methamphetamine is really the horrible drug out there. You do methamphetamine, your behavior is altered, you do bad things, and that's the people that we're dealing with in our courts. They said methamphetamine is the best example we can think of a prohibition drug. Methamphetamine wouldn't exist but for prohibition. It's cheap, it's easy to make, and so the consequences fall disparagingly on the poor. They said, we're not suggesting the following, but if cocaine were legal, people would use cocaine as opposed to methamphetamine without the negative behavioral consequence that goes along with methamphetamine. Now, wouldn't it be wonderful if the government actually told the truth and said, oh yeah, cocaine, there's not this negative behavioral consequence, but cocaine literally puts holes in your heart. I mean, people that use cocaine their entire lives end up dying from heart attacks. I mean, that's the course that you go down if you're a regular cocaine user. And Whitney Houston is a great example of somebody who's used cocaine their entire lives. That's what ends up happening. Yes. Yes.
Is that at the University of New Mexico?
Yes.
Did you pay 100% of the cost of your education, or just the fraction that the state didn't cover through taxes?
No, I paid for the 100%. Yeah.
You paid out-of-state tuition?
No, not out of state. I lived in New Mexico, so I paid in-state tuition, but...
Tax-subsidized lower tuition?
Yes, no, that's correct. Yeah.
According to the Libertarian website, Libertarians don't believe in public education and public schools. They think it should be everything should be market, free enterprise, free market, including this room we're in. Should be free market. We should shut down the University of Colorado and just have DU and the University of Phoenix and Harvard.
No, never. I would never make that proclamation on Colorado. That's Colorado to decide, but not the federal government.
No, I'm not talking about federal government, I'm talking about libertarian.
No, I don't think libertarians would suggest that you as Coloradans, that libertarians would point the finger at you and say, this is what you have to do? I don't think so.
The libertarian website says that. So I just took it at face value. That the libertarians don't want to have public education. They want to have private education. And University of Colorado, CSU, or I'll shut down.
No. Well, just for a second, if I may describe for you what I think the number one thing that the federal government could do when it comes to education, and that would be to abolish the Federal Department of Education. And very quickly, as governor of New Mexico, each state gets 11 cents out of every school dollar that every state spends from the federal government. But it comes with 16 cents worth of strings attached. The federal government says you have to implement No Child Left Behind. You have to do A, you have to do B, you have to do C, you have to do D, and here's 11 cents to accomplish that. Well, it costs 16 cents to accomplish that. So what people don't recognize is that it's really a negative to take federal money. It really costs to take federal money. So if the federal government just got out of education and left it to the states, 50 laboratories of innovation and best practice, I think that's exactly what we would have. I think we'd have some fabulous success that would get emulated by other states because we're so competitive. I also think there'd be some horrible failure that would get avoided for the same reasons. No, I think I am. I don't want to tell you what you...
Next question.
I don't know what's on the Libertarian website. I apologize. I don't know what's on the Libertarian website.
Question.
Well, no, it's. I mean, you're all weed up there, and I'm telling you, I don't want to dictate to you what you should or shouldn't do here at the University of Colorado. I do believe that guaranteed government student loans really make higher education immune from the pricing that if guaranteed government student loans didn't exist, would, I'm going to argue, be dramatically lower than what they are.
That's true.
Gary, what steps, like specific steps, would you take to end the drug war? And part two of that question is, would you abolish the DEA? And would you pardon all of the nonviolent drug offenders that are in federal prisons?
So I think this is going to end up being a 50-state phenomenon. I think Colorado leads the way. I can't abolish the DEA, but I can advocate abolishing the DEA, and I will advocate abolishing the DEA. What I can do without any congressional approval is, and I did this as governor of New Mexico. Well, no, I can't do. No, you can't defund. In other words, you can't do that, or you get sued. That's the. These are laws that have been passed, and so they'll fund it. And if you can veto the appropriation, but they'll override. But what you can do, and what I did as governor of New Mexico is I did issue pardons for hundreds of individuals who'd actually served out their terms. Had paid back to society. And we have tens of millions of Americans in this country that are convicted felons that I would argue, but for our drug laws, would otherwise be tax-paying, law-abiding citizens. And then there's the whole commuting sentences for those that are in jail on victimless nonviolent crime, which is really the profile of federal prison today. So yes, I've issued a paper saying that this is exactly what I would do. The pardons and the commutations. And that was one of the untold stories also of the prohibition of alcohol, is when it was repealed, there was that untold story of going through and commuting sentences and pardoning individuals. And another thing that you've probably heard here in Colorado, and that is that, hey, you all can vote yes on Prop 64, but the federal government will come in and still administer federal laws. Look, that's what brought down the prohibition of alcohol, was New York saying, look, we're not going to enforce federal laws anymore. If you want to come in and enforce them, have at it, but we're not doing it anymore. So this, I still believe, leads to the end of prohibition.
This is an October 18th Facebook thing. I said, I got this. I said, try this quiz to see which candidate you side with. So my post back was, interesting, surprising test. Turns out my answers say I side with Gary Johnson, Libertarian candidate from New Mexico. Trouble is, I've never heard of Gary Johnson. Go Gary. October 18th. So here we are in Colorado. We have more registered independents, or rather than registered Democrats or Republicans. And you've got a problem. You've got a PR problem. I mean, the fact that here I am and have never heard of you. And so something's got to change. My question is this. You could speak to that. But my suspicion is that I'm a recovering investment banker, Morgan Stanley, New York. We got to end the Fed, okay? I mean, that's and so, like the college professor here, I actually have some concerns about libertarianism and not taking care of the disenfranchised, and we've got to take care of the poor. So we can set that aside. But I do agree with you firmly on enough things that you were clearly at the lead of the list. How are you going to end the Fed? Tell me, what are you going to do? I mean, because you can't hand it over to Congress. They're a bunch of knuckleheads.
Well, no.
No, I mean, this is serious.
No,
do you inflate gold to $60,000 an ounce? Or what are you going to do? Break it down for us.
Well, I'm just pointing out the obvious. Is much of what I'm talking about requires congressional approval to do. But don't discount having a leader that's going to get up every single day and advocate and talk about these issues in a way that resonates with Americans. I mean, for the most part, I think the issue of the Federal Reserve goes over everybody's head.
Yeah.
Most people don't understand it. And so putting that into simple terms, talking about it all the time, this was my experience as governor of New Mexico. And by the way, as governor of New Mexico, I mean, there were going to be people dead in the streets. Kids were going to be starving. I was a Darwinist, survival of the fittest. Well, it didn't happen that way at all. Actually, I do care about people, and in a state that's 2-to-1 Democrat, I'm the guy that got elected by a bigger margin the second time than the first time. I just think it speaks volumes to the fact that there's the rhetoric on one side, there's the actions on the other. I'd like to think that everything matches up with the rhetoric when it comes to me. Everything.
But that didn't answer my question. I mean, how do you disassemble the Fed? I'm just saying, what would you do? I mean, you could nationalize it. I mean, you could at least from.
No, the President of the United States couldn't nationalize it. It would require congressional approval for whatever. Whatever transpired would require congressional.
Ron Paul's audit the Fed and the Senate.
Yeah, I mean, yes. All right, great. Good answer. Next. What else do you do? Well, that's what I want to hear about, competing currencies.
Audit the Fed right now. I mean, to have a president to advocate, to stand up and say, what is an audit the Fed bill? Well, an audit the Fed bill would be to just shine light on what QE3 is all about. What assets are they buying? I mean, yeah, they're buying mortgage securities, but what kind of stocks are they buying? And how much of our bonds are we buying up in a closed loop? I mean, it's like Bernie Madoff with a printing machine. And so an audit of the Federal Reserve right now, I think, might be the collapse of the U.S. monetary system, because we would realize just how
screwed we are.
Well, just what a Ponzi scheme this is and where we've gotten with it.
That's right.
Yeah, so I just wanted to ask, what would you do about too big to fail banks, which are now have their assets are a higher percent of GDP than before the financial crisis, and in my opinion, represent a threat to the society that we live in?
Well, yeah, the notion of too big to fail. I would not have bailed out the banks, and I'm not doing this in a vacuum. I got a lot of really renowned free market economists to a person believing that there would not have been a system-wide collapse. We bailed out the banks. They should have been rewarded for their poor decision-making by being allowed to fail.
So going forward, when we have another crisis, which we're going to have, what do we do when they start, the nuclear threat again? If you don't give us unlimited trillions of dollars at 0%, we're going to crash the stock market, or the whole world's going to go down the toilet bowl. Well, how will you respond to that threat?
When the world doesn't go down the toilet bowl, when you actually establish a free market bottom, which will happen a lot more swiftly, and then we'll see the recovery. And if housing would have been allowed to have collapsed, I mean, there's two sides to this story. The whole notion of how many in this room had savings accounts, that if the housing market were to have allowed to collapse, have actually been allowed to seek a real free market bottom, would have been able to afford housing that you would have never dreamed that you would have been able to afford. But we've propped it up, we've artificially propped it up. And this is government manipulating the economy. This is government intervening militarily. It's a mess. It's a mess. So a couple more questions, and again, I really want to thank everybody.
All right, my question is, I'm undecided. Figuring out this whole libertarian thing. Where do you guys stand on the Second Amendment and right to bear arms?
I don't know how the Second Amendment could be any more clear, and so I'm not the guy to legislate the number of bullets in the round, the caliber of weapon. I'm not the guy.
That's right.
So America is seen as a leader around the world as well, and I know you do have the strong stance of not intervening in other countries militarily. But when it comes to foreign aid for other poorer countries, say, for example, the earthquake in Haiti, because we're seen as that leader, how would you go approach a natural disaster in a poor country like that? Would you sit back and watch it happen, or would you be willing to step forward and?
I think in our benevolence, in our generosity, that we want to put a hand out to those that maybe really are in need, and that would include that Haiti kind of a situation. But you know what? You're pointing out just a minute fraction of when you talk about foreign aid. Foreign aid doesn't go to poor people in foreign countries. Foreign aid goes to new dictatorships that have taken over from old dictatorships. Foreign aid goes from poor people in this country to rich people in other countries that are ruling these other countries. That's what foreign aid goes. So, last one.
I was wondering what practical things that I can do as a voter to help support third parties and help bring down the two-party system that we have today.
Practically, it would be to cast a vote on Tuesday. Practically, it would be to take your neighbors by the collar and just ask them to check it out. Ask them to take the isidewith.com quiz. I mean, what harm is there in going to isidewith.com, taking a 36 questionnaire, and getting paired up with the candidate most in line with your views? Now, last time I looked at iSidewith, there were like 4 million people that had taken the test. And last time I looked at it, Barack Obama had 265 electoral votes, and I had 263 electoral votes last time I looked. And that was the 4 million people that have taken iSidewith, and that ends up to be my criticism of Obama is based on what he says. You gotta vote for the guy based on what he says. But if you want to vote, but you can't vote for him if it's based on what he's done, because nothing he has done matches up with the river.
All right.